Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it and others up for some pretty ambitious cruising. If that's the sort of thing that you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. And for those of you who celebrate such things, a very happy Christmas Eve to you. And for those of you who don't, a very happy today. Now, this week I finally wrap up those cabinets in the wheelhouse, and I really enjoyed doing it. A little bit of a twist on how I finally get those hinges on, but I'll explain all that shortly. Alright then, so it's time to square up the corners on the doors where I routed them, and I'm hoping I can do this here on my little table. With my Christmas tree and my lamp still here, because it brings me good light. Anyway, let's see how this works. I'm not going to be able to hit too hard on this table, but we'll get a few strikes in here. Okay, let's try that. See if I can hit a little harder. Ah, that's better. As long as I'm directly over the post below, I can do this. Somehow I think this is more of a wine project. There we go. Cheers. All right then. Beauty! Beauty, 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 beauty! Okay, so now to gain for the hinges. These are lovely, lovely extruded brass hinges from Lee Valley here in Canada. Unfortunately, they ran out of stock, so I was actually only able to get one set this week. So I'll put them on this big main door, and I can at least get my glassware put away. Anyway, so cutting or installing, or what I call gaining hinges, simply means cutting the mortise relief in the side of the door and also in the frame. Now, because these are deep extruded hinges, that's quite a deep mortise. So anyway, let me show you my technique for it. Many of you will have already seen this. Okay, so I've got the cabinet down and the door is going to sit in here like this. Now, in this case, the companionway is on that side, so I'm going to open this cabinet this way so that there's no risk of it ever opening in front of someone coming in up the companionway. So the hinges are going to go on this side. So what I do is I take these and I clamp them, and I have a couple of handy dandy clamps for that. And I'll just get started with the clamping process and then fine tune it as I move along. What I'm going to do at this point is actually just swing the whole apparatus off the edge of the table here so I can work on it like this. So with the two surfaces flush, I also have to make sure it's aligned vertically, or in this case horizontally, and if I can slide an awful blade down so that it's inside the opening but outside the door on both sides, well, then I know I'm in just the sweet spot. So my technique to lining up to gain out for the hinge is just to place the hinge in the correct location, and in this case the top edge is lined up with the bottom of the rail here, and then spread across exactly across the two members, and then I will install it in this location. And to do that, I'm going to use my handy dandy self-centering drill bit. Anyone who's been watching the show for more than a little while has seen me use this before. So it just takes a tiny little dot, and I'll run a single tiny little number 4 screw in here. These are actually cheap mild steel screws. I'm using these now because it just helps with the assembly, because they're so much stronger than brass screws, but these will be replaced with brass screws in time. Okay, so now it's about scoring around the edges of where the hinges are so that I can get a good clean chisel edge when I start chiseling these out. And that's simple, it's just knife work. So now I'll just take the hinges back off. Okay, chisel work. Yeah, as pleasant as this is, I think it's gonna have to wait till tomorrow. Well, good morning. I think I've determined that the traditional knife and chisel technique to gain these hinges is not gonna work, especially under the conditions of what I have here in terms of a workbench. I'm gonna try something that I've been meaning to try for quite a while, but it does involve a road trip. And so again, very grateful to be able to borrow Lady Zephyrus's car, back up to Genoa, get some stuff to make this go a little bit better. All right then, so back in the shed in Genoa Bay, and what I'm gonna try and do is use my Dremel with the little handy dandy semi-router base attachment thing to try and route out for those hinges and see if that makes any sense. It's something I've thought about for a long time actually and never even tried, so let's give that a go. Okay, so I've just gone out and bought two little router straight cutting bits for the Dremel. One is teeny tiny and one is significantly bigger. You can see they actually have cutters on the end so they can do a bit of plunge cutting. Now, obviously the larger one is going to make this a lot easier. It'll make cleaner cuts and be a lot easier to control. However, the smaller one has the advantage that the radiuses where it can't cut in the corners are going to be much, much smaller, and there'll be much less for me to chisel out. Not that this is going to leave a massive amount. Anyway, first thing I want to do before I try to make any sort of jig is actually to chuck them up in this little Dremel of mine and see if I can do a reasonably clean little cutout in this piece of sapele. Okay, let's go. Well, at first I would say it's a bit fuzzy, but what if I hit it with a little bit of sandpaper? Blow it out. That's not actually a very bad little cutout. That might work just fine. And that's with the small bit. Okay, on the success of that cut, I'm gonna go with the small bit. So to set up a jig, I need something that the outside of this little router base can sit on. So the first thing I need to know is the distance between the outside edge of the bit and the outside edge of the router base, and it's about 1 1/8 inches. Now, if I was to imagine that I'm going to make a little box and that the router bit can ride in, it would be, and what I'm trying to do is cut out obviously this small area for the actual hinge. So the hinge is at 1 1/8 inches by 2 inches. So if the router bit is going to sit in there, it has to be able to ride on an outer box, some sort of fence on the outside that is 1 1/8 inches larger in every direction. So it'll bounce around inside the box, and then I can just clean up everything that's left. Well, that's great. So now I just need to make a little plate like this that I can cut this hole out of and put little fences on the outside of it, and by adding the width of the hinge and 2 times 1 1/8 gives me 3 3/8, and the width is 2 plus twice 1 3/8 giving me 4 1/4. Should be easy. So here's my basic block that I will eventually put the fences on. First thing I want to do is take out a bit of a dado out of the bottom so it can sit over the 2 edges of the door and frame. If you imagine them being drawn here underneath the jig, this is the door and this is the frame, and that way I'm routing out both at the same time. You'll see as we move along. So here's the door and here's the frame, and imagine them having a hinge. We just open the hinge and the hinge is going to sit right there. Now I can take my jig and just slide it over the door and the frame, and I can start to make the cutout that the router will bounce around on. Hope this works. Okay, so I've made myself 4 little fences here, and basically they will just sit on like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they will provide a little enclosure for the router base to sit in. All right, then, well, that worked out pretty well, but you may be able to see a flaw in my plan. Yeah, my little channel to slide over, and no, yeah. Okay, there we go. Nice, 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 nice. Now, there's an added really neat feature of the particular dimensions that this all worked out, and a 1/4 of an inch fence piece. And that's when I slide that right against the end, or wherever the frame will be, it actually perfectly positions it for where I want the hinge in terms of the offset from the bottom of the rail or stile. Very, very pleased with that. Okay, so time to actually cut out the actual aperture in here that the remaining routing will have to cut through, and that's simply just routing it. Okay, so this will start with a little bit of a plunge route and then turn it into the box. Wait a second, I'm having too much fun, but there's no reason for me to route the whole thing out. I just need to cut it out. Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on, Peter. Well, that is the hardest cut this little rig jig is ever going to have to make. So far, I'm loving this. Loving it. Okay, so it's time to try it. Here's our frame and door. I'm going to clamp them together and install it. Install the jig. Let's just get that, and I'm going to slide it up against the clamp. And here we go. Okay, all I really want to do is cut the outside so I can measure it. Whoa, very, very close. That'll do. Perfect. Oh my gosh, excellent. Okay, so I think it's time to take this thing back to the city and see if I can't do some excellent hinge mortising. Well, hello there and welcome to Motor Vessels Zephyrus. As it is the holiday season, it's the season of eating, at least it is for me. And I've been given the opportunity this evening to cook up one of my specialties. We have guests over for the holidays, and the opening night meal is Peter's chicken cordon bleu. It's not very Christmassy perhaps, but it's a really great meal. And gentlemen, if you want an absolute winner with very, very little skill required, this is it. All it really requires is excellent quality ingredients. Let's get going. So, base ingredients are boneless chicken breast, organic if you please, Gruyere cheese, please, no Monterey Jack for this, and Black Forest ham. Get the best you can find. A couple of really good eggs, some cream, and then the ancillary ingredients are panko breadcrumbs, a little bit of Dijon mustard, and quite a bit of butter. I'm going to use my cache of Kerrygold for this. This stuff is quite something. The wine is for the chef. Now I'm cooking for 4 this evening. Normally one breast does 2, so I'm just going to cut these in half. Now you might say, okay, there may be a more clever way to cut a chicken breast in half to hammer out for a chicken cordon bleu, but I have found, seeing as you're just hammering it anyway, it makes little difference how cleverly you cut it. Now the only really exclusive tool you really need for this, because you're going to hammer this chicken, is a meat hammer or mallet, or I don't even know what you call this. Anyway, this is simply used to spread out the chicken so it's large enough that you can roll it around the yummy ham and cheese. So I've done this with a wine bottle or the bottom of a beer bottle or anything sort of large and heavy that will do it, although the real thing makes a big difference. Okay, with the chicken prepared, now just a little bit of Dijon. There we go. That's about right. Now we can spread that around. Don't be shy. This is what gives it that lovely extra yummy zinginess. So the idea here is to get as much Gruyere and ham into these chunks of chicken here to roll up. So I used to think you had to be super careful about this and tidy and keep it all sealed up, but the truth is you absolutely do not. Simply pack it full of cheese and ham, roll it up the best you can, and it'll all work out in the end. I used to layer the ham and the cheese, but I don't think there's any real reason to do that. It all just turns out to be hammy and cheesy in the end anyway. Okay, here comes the fun part, and the secret weapon here is a couple of toothpicks. I try to use as few toothpicks as possible, but they do save the day. Again, don't worry about these loose ends. And there we go. That's the hardest part. For 4 cordon bleu, I use 2 eggs, about as much cream as 1 yolk, and a heck of a lot of ground pepper. And the panko. Now we're going to use a lot of this, so keep it handy. Okay, this is where it gets fun. Normally when you do an egg wash breadcrumb job, you try to keep one hand dry and one hand wet with the breadcrumb with the egg wash, but in this case you pretty much have to sacrifice both hands to be able to get this all done, especially because I double dip. There we go. Yes, yes, yes. And again, this is where stuff may just fall apart on you. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter that much. And there we go. Woohoo! So let's see if we can transfer this little technology with the jig and the router to the actual cabinet. So here I have where we got started, and I'll just clamp this together somewhere around there and somewhere around here. And again, confirm that I'm correct left to right. Perfect, 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 perfect. Okay, then, well, at least one small complication. The test wood that I used up in Geronimo Bay was slightly thicker, even though it still was dressed to 3/4. So I actually now have to put tiny spacers in to make sure that the jig centers properly on these, which is fine. There's no harm having a tiny space here. The little more of the barrel of the hinge will stick outside. That is just fine. The other thing I have to do is make sure I absolutely nail where these hinges go, where I'd already cut out with the knife, so that I don't have a little mark around it. So I think I'm in pretty good shape, and time will tell. All right then, let's have a look. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thrilled. Okay. Yes, 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 yes. Love it. And there we go. Very, very, very pleased with that. Now, not everything here is perfect. One of the first things that isn't perfect is that even though I ripped up a whole lot of really tiny sapele stock to lay in here and install with a little pin nailer, well, as you all may know, the pin nailer is unavailable. So I'm gonna have to defer that and just hold it in with some tiny screws for now, which isn't the end of the world, but... And here we go, all installed and looking fabulous. I can hardly tell you how pleased I am with the way this worked out. And finally, I have a glassware cabinet with room for lots more. Gosh knows what I'll end up putting here. I imagine it might be crockery in the end. I really can't tell. Anyway, it's nice to finally finish this up. You may notice that there are no hinges in the two side cabinets. I think I mentioned early on that I wasn't able to get 3 sets of hinges, but that'll be looked after early in the new year, and I'll have even more storage. Anyway, really pleased to be able to put this together. Now, coming up next week, which will be, the episode will be aired on New Year's Eve, I thought it might be fun to do a question and answer. So what I'm asking you all now is in the comments down below, or any other way you'd like to get a hold of me, ask your question and I will go through them all and tell all about all the things that are going on going forward. There might be some small changes in strategy into the new year, which I'll also share with you at that time. Anyway, if you've enjoyed what you've seen and you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing. And if you really liked it, give it a thumbs up, and better yet, send it as a share to that friend of yours who would also find it interesting. All right, thanks again. Well, hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week, Eggnog of the Week, coming to you this week from the cozy wheelhouse of MV Poem in beautiful downtown Victoria, British Columbia, on this beautiful Christmas Eve. All right, let's get straight to the beverage. And yes, well, as it is Christmas Eve, I thought an eggnog might be suitable. Cheers. This eggnog is, and this is not an endorsement, I just always name the beer, right? Avalon Dairy here on Vancouver Island, an absolutely fantastic organic eggnog, and good old Kraken rum, and a healthy dose of cinnamon to go with that. Merry Christmas to those of you who do that. Let's jump straight into last week's winner of a t-shirt, and that winner is Colin Kulasic 1128. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Congratulations, Colin. You've won yourself a Travels with Geordie t-shirt. Get a hold of me and we'll make sure we get that sent out to you. I would love to thank, last week we had a brand new patron come aboard, and that is Robert Cameron. Thank you ever so much, Robert. I'm very grateful. Cheers. I don't know why I don't drink this year round. It's yummy. All right. That brings us to the very end of the beer of the week, eggnog of the week, and that is the word of the week. And because it is the holiday season, isn't it opportune that this week's word of the week is holiday, holidays, whatever version of that works for you. Happy holidays to all of you and yours. Cheers. See you on New Year's Eve. This is what it's like to live next to the legislature.